Hello there. Um, we're looking at the week of July 26th, and we're going to make we're looking at the first reading here of this week. Actually, it's for Sunday, August 2nd. I'm reading from the pamphlet that hopefully some of you get and you will pick up during service. And it's one of the readings that comes from Isaiah. It's a rather long book. We talked about Isaiah, I think, 2 weeks ago. Um, and there's a discussion if there's really one person who wrote Isaiah, or was it really two or three? It's usually sort of discussed that one person did it or three people did it. Because we talked about how it really deals with the conquest of Israel. You have, I think about 36 kings all along in Israel, the time of Israel, and only 6 of them after Solomon followed the ways of the Lord. And we talked about even last week that even Solomon, started out really well. He didn't finish very, very well. And so we're talking about Isaiah here, and it's a lot of times people use Isaiah as a Messianic prophecy. It tells us that the Messiah is coming, and there's a lot of things that can be referenced from that. This might be one of them. I'm not going to go in that direction. I'm just looking at what the commentators are saying when we get to verse 4. I'll point that out to you. But it is one of my favorite passages, and I'm not sure. Okay, I should say that. It is a passage that I know and that I do like reading, and I'm wondering why that's the case. And I think one of them is that 10th Avenue North, which is a contemporary Christian group. It's one of my favorite groups, and they have a song that deals with this. The start of this, come everyone, who's thirsty, come to the water, and that's how this starts. It is sort of neat in how it starts with the very first word. It says ho, ho, and that's a Hebrew term that talks about, come on, pay attention here. It's like, yo, talk to me here, or listen to me here. And in a lot of cases, or in 2 cases in this short passage in 5 verses, they use that. They use these things that, people who are writing it or speaking it aloud, they would call the attention of the reader or the hearer, like using that word "ho." Is that, hey, pay attention here. And the other thing in verse 3 is incline your ear and come to me, listen so that you may live. And I find it sort of interesting is this is like, pay attention. So even I should have used some of those in my classroom. It's like, hey, incline your ear towards me. I don't know if it would have helped. But we did talk about where this is occurring. The whole book of Isaiah has the Assyrians attacking and really sort of really conquering a lot of Israel. They didn't take over Jerusalem. God intervened on that with King Hezekiah. And then they left. They rushed home because the general had a dream that something was happening in Assyria. And then the Babylonians came, and the Babylonians just wiped them out. And one of the things that each empire sort of had to, you had to sort of think about what they did. And so the Babylonians, when they conquered, they would take people out of their place. They take the smartest, the intellectual, the wealthiest, and they would take them and bring them back to their country. Okay, so there is this huge group of people that were living in Babylonia. There was another group of people, the people who were just sort of day laborers and farmers and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that they're not intelligent, but they have to work the land still because they need, they have to pay taxes to the empire, the Babylonian Empire. So you can't take everyone and just leave it desolate because then it wouldn't help them. And so you leave the ones that were so-called lower skilled and leave them there and let them work the land, and then they would have to pay tribute or pay taxes to them. This letter is written at that, or this part of the Isaiah is talking about that time, but it's also towards the end of the empire of Babylonia. It's close to the end of it. And so afterwards, Persia is going to come in and wipe out the Babylonians and take over the lands of Israel. And that king had a little different philosophy. That king allowed people to come back to their native land, again, continue to work and continue to pay taxes and stuff like that and send money to the empire. But the king had a little different emphasis there. So that's enough probably said about that. Let's go to the readings of today's reading is Isaiah 55, 1 through 5. Oh, everyone who thirsts comes to the water. Come, and let me try it again. Everyone who thirsts come to the waters, and you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. And I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. See, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader, a commander for the peoples. See, you shall call nations that you do not know, and nations that you do not know, you shall run to you. That do not know you shall run to you because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. And so it's one of those that, again, taking the time, again, we have huge group of the Israelites in Babylonia, working and toiling, not for their own good, but for, the empire, the Babylonian Empire. And you get, another small group, who is working the land, again, paying tribute to the Babylonians. And you get Isaiah, writing this or speaking this to, and I'm sort of wondering, so you get this context of where they are, what the people are, what they're doing. But you also, if it doesn't have any kind of carryover or application to our times, then what's the point of this? So I'm sort of wondering as we talk about this is if it does have any carryover. And so listen to that and see if you can apply some of the carryover that you might read here. So here's that contrast that I talked about is the Israelites are working in this empire. They're working hard. They're laboring for the empire. They're really not laboring for their own, good. And now Isaiah writes, and look at, so you can imagine what's happening there. And now Isaiah says, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. And so you have to understand here is that, here are two staples of your diet, wine or milk. And look at what the economy is telling me. The Babylonian economy says work hard, and you might eke out a little living if we allow you to do that. Okay. Here, we get a whole new economy. We get God's economy. God's economy says, here, this is amazing. Look at these provisions: water, wine, milk. And that's amazing. Those are great provisions, but the best part of those provisions is that they're free. There is no hard labor that's involved there. You don't have to work, at someone else's fields or someone else's company and get nothing for it or very little. Here, the provisions that God is promising his people is that there are staples, milk, water, and wine, but they have no cost. And so if we look at verse 2, it says, why do you spend your money by that which is not bread, and your labor for which does not satisfy? And I think the key question there is why? Why would they do that? Well, probably because they want to survive and they want to live. But I think Isaiah's point is that spending money on these things that doesn't fulfill are worthless. And bread is the other staple. And so he's hit all the staples that they would have in the diet: bread, milk, or wine, and water, that were huge for just daily living. And all of this is free. And so, that it's basically Isaiah saying, why would you spend your money on things that are wasteful? That's what Isaiah is trying to get to. And then we get part of the second verse. Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food, because this stuff comes from God, not what you're getting in Babylonia. So it's really sort of a contrast of two economies. You could really sort of talk about God's economy versus the Babylonian economy, or maybe our world economy. And if we're going to sort of see how it relates to us a little bit, maybe are we comparing God's economy to the United States economy? And so we get that phrase that I like as a teacher is like one of those: pay attention, this is going to be important, this might be on the test. Incline your ear, come to me, listen so that you may live. And I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast sure love for David. And so we get this idea that these provisions are going to be everlasting. It's a covenant that one of the prophets during this time, though, too, is Jeremiah. God made a promise. It's called the Jeremiah covenant, about no longer will you have to really worry about this knowledge, or think about it, because God is going to put it in your mind, put it in your mind and write it on your heart, and you won't have to go to a neighbor or find someone, because everyone will know it. Everyone will know this covenant, from the least of them to the greatest of them. And so that's what he's calling here. He says this covenant is a promise. Another name for a covenant is promise. God is making a promise to his people, and it's based on his love for David. So if you want to know what this, what it looks like, look at his relationship with King David. And you'll find that it was an everlasting type of promise. So again, God is offering love in this economy. And what has been happening to the empire? What has been happening now as you're working? Maybe exploitation, maybe just oppression. Maybe, just really sort of probably some bad things that are happening to the Israelites who are living under the rule and the thumb of the Babylonians. And then finally, verse 4, see, I made a witness to the peoples, a people, and the commander for the peoples. And if we sort of break this down a little bit, is a witness probably reads someone who tells the truth in this case. And a lot of the prophets were witnesses because they told the truth, and not because you wanted to hear it. A lot of times it got them in trouble with other people, other leaders that didn't speak the truth. So a leader reads here, or a witness reads here as someone who speaks the truth. A leader here means ruler, and a commander here means a ruler who has authority. And this is where, it could be talking about Messiah, could be talking about Jesus Christ. But, some other commentators say, who do we have that the Israelites will know? And that would be David. And so most people think that, that this is David here that they're talking about, who's witnessed people's a commander, a leader, and a commander of people's, someone who has authority. And then following it up, and I think it's sort of neat that people will recognize you, people from all nations, even the nations you don't know, will come and recognize you. And that's how great how his kingdom, David's kingdom was, is that he ruled pretty much the earth in his kingdoms. And why? Because God has glorified. And God has glorified this one. And so it's really a description of two economies, I think, in this case. Yahweh's economy, God's economy, versus our current economy, whatever current that may be. How does it stack up? How does it compare? And what should we be working for? If we are the Israelites, what should we be working for? Or if we're in 2020 in the United States, what should we be working for? The peace of the Lord be with you always.